This is Q13 News This Morning.
Ahead, we are having a tough conversation about eating disorders and the shocking news that they're going up among children. We are helping you identify the symptoms and telling you about the program giving families in our area some resources on this Friday. So this morning we're having a conversation about eating disorders and spotting them in children. Now stereotypically we may think eating disorders impact teens or college students or middle-aged women, but there's research that now shows more kids may be developing them as well. So this morning I'm joined by Jillian Lampert, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for the EmilyProgram here in Seattle. Jillian, good morning.
Good morning.
So we were just having an interesting conversation because, yeah, I mean, we mentioned teens and college students. So when we say children, I mean, what age are we talking about here?
I think we're talking about sort of that 10 to 13-year-old age group that we haven't really thought of as much before, but we're seeing those kids developing eating disorders.
That's scary.
It is.
That's so young.
It is. It's so young. But you think about all of the things that, you know, kids are getting phones earlier. They're seeing social media earlier. They're so focused on
this world that's kind of fake and the Snapchat filter.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And sort of put your best face forward. And what does that mean to your real self?
So that's having an impact on kids. But you were also saying that some of it's genetic as well.
Right, right. So that we understand that eating disorders are certainly impacted by the environment. But people who get eating disorders typically are genetically at risk to get an eating disorder. Otherwise, everybody would get one that was influenced by all this environmental and, you know, sort of messaging. So there's a genetic piece that predisposes people that's probably due to neurobiology and sort of how their brain is wired, if you will, that kids who are more attentive to detail and really persistent and really want to do a good job and notice everything, those kids are at higher risk for developing an eating disorder. They also tend to do great in school, they're great students, they're great kids, they're high achievers, but they're the ones that are at a little bit higher risk because of how their brain works, particularly if it gets sort of hijacked by changing the way they eat.
I am glad that you mentioned that because I feel like there might be some self-blame involved in that. So to say like, hey, this is your biology and this is not you know, absolutely your fault, I feel like that might be helpful there.
I think it absolutely is. I think the message that people sometimes think like eating disorders are a choice or they're not a real illness, they are not a choice. They are a real illness, just like breaking your leg needs help, an eating disorder needs help. You don't set out to break your leg. You don't set out to get an eating disorder. So the idea that some people are more likely than others to get them if something happens with their eating is really important because kids come home from school or they come home from seeing something somewhere and they decide, I shouldn't eat fat anymore. It's bad. And that's not true, and it's not the right advice, and that's probably not actually what they said in school or even on social media, but that's how it was interpreted. So the child decides to change how they're eating, they get swept up in some healthy eating kind of craze, and before anybody knows it, they're obsessing about food, they're obsessing about their weight, they're, you know, trying to manage their food intake in a different way. That's when things get problematic.
That does sound like some of maybe the warning signs that parents need to watch out for. I mean, it does seem like it might be hard to spot some of those things.
It can be because in a health-conscious world, you want your kids to be healthy.
Absolutely.
Every parent wants their kid to be healthy, right? So if somebody comes home and says, "I'm going to eat more vegetables," your inner parent is like, "Yay, that's terrific." But if it skews to one side, or if it's they're overly worried about what they look like, or they're really worried about pubertal changes, which is that time frame we're talking about, or they start to really say disparaging things about their body, that's when you want to not accept that as normal. And I think as parents we think, oh, puberty's really hard. Who wants to do that again? And we just sort of accept it as normal that they won't like their bodies. But that language is important to pay attention to.
Especially as adults, I feel like we forget what kids take in and what they absorb. I mean, how do you start that conversation? Because I feel like even we I'm guilty of having that negative self-talk. I wouldn't want a kid to hear that.
Right, exactly. And that's the main thing that parents and adults can do is monitor their self-talk. That if you're standing in front of a mirror getting dressed and you're like, oh, I hate how I look, or I can't believe this, or I can't believe that, and your child is hearing that, remember our kids think we're kind of superheroes, at least for a while, and they hear us saying something disparaging about ourselves, and then what are they supposed to think about their bodies? Like, if my parent who's a superhero doesn't like their body, what about me? And so it's really important to keep that sort of manage that on your own, get some help around that, but really don't say it out loud. You won't cause your child to have an eating disorder by saying those things, but it certainly won't be helpful. And it's not, frankly, helpful for you. If you instead looked in the mirror and said, wow, I'm strong. My legs are going to take me to work today.
That's a great way to think.
That's a much better way to do it.
So if parents need more help, you guys have the Emily program in Seattle. How can they reach out to you?
EmilyProgram.com. The number to call is on there. You can click a button and fill out an information form and send it in, and we'll call you back. So just go to the website. Everything's there.
Jillian, this is great information. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me
here.